Good evening, I'm Jon Lentz, City and State's Managing Editor, and this is Last Look. Today I'm joined by Jon Sabini, former state senator and former chair of the state's Racing and Wagering Board. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I want to talk today about the casino constitutional amendment that will be on the ballot this year. Do you think this will pass? Do you think voters will support it?
Well, I think history shows us that over the years now people have become more accepting of casinos. 20 years ago, very few casino referendums passed around the country. That's changed, and I think it probably will pass, but not without some argument on both sides, and I think it'll be fairly close.
And what do you think about the governor's plan? He called for an Upstate plan. There could be up to 7 casinos, but at first just 4, and only in Upstate. What do you think about that idea?
I think the financial markets are going to be a little skeptical about investing a lot upstate unless they know where the other casinos are going to go. History shows that people gamble as close as they can and don't like to travel. The most successful casino in the world at one time was in a place called Moon Landing, Mississippi. It was called Splash, and it was 35 miles out of Memphis. It was so successful at the time that you had to wait online and pay admission to get in. That lasted about a year when casinos opened in Tunica and Robinsonville, Mississippi, which was 10 miles closer to Memphis. Because frankly no one lived in Moon Landing. Splash eventually closed, opened up again, tried to open up again, closed again. The fact is that people want convenience when they go to gamble. So unless a location is a resort is open closer than Allentown, Pennsylvania, the Foxwoods Mohegan Sun complex in Connecticut, or Atlantic City, they're not going to be on the scale that you really would want because people want convenience.
Well, that brings up the issue of destination resorts. A lot of proponents say the casino business has changed. They're going to bring in restaurants and hotels and entertainment and concerts. But is it realistic to expect that in places like Tioga Downs or up in Saratoga Springs, where the population's much smaller?
It's going to be hard to assemble a capital, build grandiose places in those localities just because the banks have gotten smarter. Deutsche Bank wound up owning a casino in Las Vegas, the Cosmopolitan, before the door even opened, and they're still stuck with it years later. Look at the lesson we learned from Revel in Atlantic City, where the state backed the bonds. The Revel sat under construction for several years before the state infused some extra capital in there and some incentives to open a place, and now it's in big trouble. So the days when banks lent to casinos with a blind eye are gone because they know that they're not all going to be profitable right away. And certainly the lending community is going to want to know what the whole picture is before, say, lending in the Catskills, and they want to know if there's going to be something in Westchester in the near future so they can recoup their investment. So I don't think you're going to see sort of reckless spending by the banks. The only entity outside the city that really has the capital to put something together in a big way is Genting. They own a piece of Monticello Raceway, and presumably with the money they're making at Aqueduct and at other locations around the globe, because they're a global company, they could afford to sort of hover at even in the Catskills for a few years and wait out the downstate casinos. Other than that, I don't think you're going to see really grandiose plans upstate. You may see something, but the financing will be everything.
And you obviously have a lot of experience as the former chair of the State Racing and Wagering Board, which is now the State Gaming Commission, I believe. Are there any specific things you would do differently in the process and sort of how it's laid out?
Well, it remains to be seen how the process is going to work. The governor's made some proposals about a siting commission. I think that's good. I think Pennsylvania, which has rocketed to number 2 as the number 2 gaming state in the country in just 5 years, has done a smart thing in having 3 different categories of licenses. They gave the racetracks some casino action. They gave the big cities of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia casino action, and then they licensed the resorts. And those resorts had to have a certain number of hotel rooms. And the people who were going to gamble there had to have some business at the resort, whether they went to dinner there, they bought a t-shirt there, or they attended a conference there. You couldn't just walk in from the local town and gamble there. And I think those 3 categories have developed Pennsylvania into a success fairly quickly. Now, critics will say, well, Pennsylvania's leveled out. Well, every place levels out in the casino business. No one continually goes up. But I think Pennsylvania would be very happy to level out at the level they're at now because they're doing pretty well.
Now, there's obviously critics of a constitutional amendment to legalize casinos. Some of the editorial boards across the state and in the city, a small but vocal set of groups that are opposed to this. And they raise things like, it'll raise crime rates, you'll have these problem gamblers. I think there was a report in '99, this big overarching report from the National Gambling Impact Study Commission. It said that the presence of gambling facilities within 50 miles roughly doubles the prevalence of problem and pathological gamblers. How do you respond to these sorts of concerns that people have?
Well, first of all, we have 30,000 video lottery terminals or slot machines at tribal casinos right now in New York State. So they're pretty much all over the state now. So if people don't see it as a problem now, I don't see why table games are going to make it any much worse. The fact of the matter is that you can go to your local 7-Eleven and play lotto or quick draw, and there are people who have problems doing that, and the state tries to address that as best they can. But people have plenty of opportunities to gamble, if we don't do it in New York, it's going to be done somewhere else. The idea is to minimize it, address it in a serious manner. I believe the governor's prepared to do that.
And what are the key things to do to minimize these risks?
Self-exclusion is a big one, where people put themselves on a list saying, don't serve me if I come in, and that works. Counseling, programs where you can spot these people and to get the institutions that are offering the games to spot people who have a problem. And some have done that effectively, frankly. Some of the bigger casino chains have really gotten smart about not just accepting money from people on a limitless basis, but rather trying to address it.
And another concern is corruption in the selection process. It's not entirely clear how this will go forward if the constitutional amendment is successful, but you had issues in Queens, for example, with its Racino. There have been examples across the country with corruption. There was going to be a ban on contributions, but I think that disappeared somehow. How do you guard against those kind of problems?
Well, if I had written the legislation, I would have said that we don't have a limit on licensing, because when you have a limit on licensing in other states, that almost invites a problem. Because when there's tickets to get into the dance and those tickets are scarce, people will do things to get those tickets rather than let the market decide. Because frankly, people would say, well, we'd have casinos everywhere. You wouldn't, because the market just isn't there for it and the banks won't lend you the money to have it. So I would have done that a little differently. However, I'm pretty confident that the governor will have a selection process in place that will be one on the merits and a clean one.
And should there be gambling in New York City?
I think there should be gambling downstate. I think there will be gambling downstate at some point for this to be successful, because the markets will demand it, and because this is where the money is. The idea that there is gambling upstate now. Most downstate folks don't realize that we have full-blown casinos upstate from the tribes. One in Buffalo, one in Niagara Falls, one in Salamanca, one in Verona, and one in Hogansburg, and some of them are very, very successful. So the fact of the matter is that if you want to go to a casino upstate, you can go to any of those places. You can go to Ontario, or you can go to Pennsylvania. New York's where the demand is, where the money is, and ultimately, when I say New York, the metropolitan area is really where the action's got to be eventually for this to be successful.
Jon Sabini, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that's it for Last Look. To check out other Last Look videos, go to our website, cityandstateny.com.